somewhere between the windswept steppes east of the Caspian Sea and the great rivers of Mesopotamia, an empire rose that Rome feared, respected, and could never fully destroy. For nearly 5 centuries, a dynasty born from nomadic horsemen held the ancient world in a kind of breathless equilibrium, controlling the arteries of global trade, absorbing the cultures of 3 civilizations at once, and sending Roman legions home in defeat and humiliation. Yet today, most people cannot name them. Most cannot picture their cities, their kings, or their extraordinary achievements. That silence is not an accident of history. It is a mystery worth solving. Welcome to the full story of the Parthian Empire. In 247 BCE, a tribal people called the Parni rode out of the Central Asian steppe and seized a small Seleucid province. What began as an opportunistic rebellion against a weakening Greek successor kingdom would grow, across 2 extraordinary centuries, into one of antiquity's most formidable powers. At its height, the Arsacid dynasty commanded a realm stretching from the Euphrates River to the borders of Bactria. Their capital, Ctesiphon, rose beside the Tigris in Mesopotamia, its great Iwan arches anticipating centuries of Islamic architecture. Their cataphract cavalry, armored horsemen on armored horses, rewrote the rules of ancient warfare. Their merchants taxed the Silk Road caravans connecting Han Dynasty China to the markets of Rome. Their kings bore the ancient title King of Kings, consciously echoing Achaemenid Persian grandeur while fusing Hellenistic, Iranian, and Mesopotamian traditions into something entirely their own. This is a complete journey. From the first revolt of Arsaces, the first in the Khorasan highlands, through the great conquests of Mithridates I, through the catastrophic Roman defeat at Carrhae in 53 BCE, through the cosmopolitan splendor of Parthian court life, through the Silk Road cities where Aramaic, Greek, and Parthian inscriptions covered the same walls, all the way to the final battle at Hormozgan in 224 CE, where the last Arsacid king fell, and a new Persian dynasty rose to take his throne. Every turning point, every ruler, every city, every legacy. The Parthians left no monumental written histories of their own. They are history's great silent empire, known largely through Roman accounts written by their enemies, through thousands of silver drachm coins bearing royal portraits, and through the archaeological fragments recovered from Nisa, Dura, Europos, Hatra, and Ctesiphon. To understand them, we must read between the lines of hostile sources, listen to what the fired brick and stucco relief and polished bronze armor still whisper across 2,000 years. And when we do, what emerges is astonishing. A civilization of remarkable sophistication, resilience, and cultural creativity that shaped the ancient world far more profoundly than its silence suggests. This is not a fragment or an overview. This is the full passage through the life of an empire, its origins in nomadic freedom, its rise through military genius and political cunning, its golden centuries of trade and cultural flowering, its long struggle against Roman ambition, and its final transformation into the foundations upon which Sassanid Persia and later Islamic civilization would build. If you find yourself drawn to these complete journeys through the ancient world, please subscribe so you never miss our next exploration. Each week, we bring you the full story of a lost civilization, told with the depth, the detail, and the wonder it deserves. Now, let the steppe wind carry us back to the beginning. Let us begin our journey. The land speaks first in wind. Across the high plateaus east of the Caspian Sea, where the Kopet Dağ mountains dissolve into open steppe. The grass bends in long, slow waves beneath a sky of extraordinary depth. This is Khorasan, a Persian word meaning where the sun rises. And in the 3rd century BCE, it is a world defined by movement, by the rhythm of horses and the logic of survival. Here, among the semi-nomadic Iranian peoples of the eastern steppe, a confederation known as the Parni moves with the seasons. They are skilled riders, composite bow in hand, organized around tribal kinship and the authority of warrior chiefs. They are not yet an empire. They are not yet even a kingdom. They are a people on the edge of history, waiting for the moment when weakness elsewhere creates space for ambition. That weakness arrives from the West. Alexander the Great's death in 323 BCE had fractured his vast conquests into competing successor states. The Seleucid Empire, inheriting the eastern territories, stretches impossibly thin across Persia, Mesopotamia, and Central Asia. Its Greek administrators govern from distant cities, collecting taxes from populations who share neither their language nor their gods. By the mid-3rd century BCE, the Seleucid grip on its eastern satrapies is loosening visibly. Circa 247 BCE, a Parni chieftain named Arsaces leads his people across the frontier into the Seleucid satrapy of Parthia, a fertile corridor of land south of the Kopet Dağ, threaded with rivers and ancient trade routes. The Seleucid satrap is deposed. The province changes hands with the swift, decisive violence of a cavalry raid transformed into political conquest. Arsaces I becomes the first king of what will eventually be called the Arsacid dynasty, a name that will endure for nearly 5 centuries. The early years are precarious. Arsaces. The first establishes a dynastic sanctuary at Nisa, a fortified settlement on the Piedmont plain near what is now Ashgabat in modern Turkmenistan. The walls are mud brick, thick and practical, built for defense rather than display. Inside, storehouses and administrative structures take shape around a ceremonial core. Nisa will become the sacred burial ground of Arsacid kings, a place where the dynasty anchors its legitimacy to the soil itself. The first Arsacid coinage appears during this period, small silver drachms bearing the portrait of Arsaces I. The image is deliberately composed, a bearded archer seated on an omphalos throne, bow in hand, projecting both Iranian warrior identity and the visual grammar of Hellenistic kingship. These coins circulate as political statements as much as currency, announcing to a Greek-literate world that a new power has taken root. When Arsaces I dies, the exact date uncertain, likely before 217 BCE, his brother Tiridates continues the consolidation. The Seleucids under Antiochus III will eventually push back, reaching Parthia around 209 BCE in a major eastern campaign that forces the Arsacids into nominal submission and tribute payment. Yet the dynasty survives. It bends without breaking, preserving its structure beneath the surface of Seleucid reassertion. This survival is itself the first great Arsacid achievement. From the windswept steppe of Khorasan, from mud brick walls and silver coins no larger than a thumbnail, something durable has been planted. The riders from the steppe have dismounted and begun to build. Submission is not defeat. Sometimes it is the most precise instrument of survival available to a young dynasty with everything still to prove. When Antiochus III sweeps eastward around 209 BCE, his campaign is formidable. a Seleucid king determined to reassert control over provinces that have drifted beyond his reach. He moves through Parthia with the weight of a restored empire behind him. And the Arsacids, still fragile, still consolidating, choose the only path that preserves what they have built. They submit. They pay tribute. They acknowledge Seleucid supremacy in the formal language that courts demand. But beneath that acknowledgement, the structure holds. Antiochus III does not dismantle the Arsacid administration. He does not install a Seleucid governor or garrison the mud-brick citadels of Nisa with Greek soldiers. He accepts tribute and moves on, drawn further east toward Bactria and the Indian frontier, where other ambitions await. The Parthians watch him go, and then they continue building. This is the quiet genius of the early Arsacid period, the ability to appear smaller than they are, to absorb pressure without fracturing, to maintain internal coherence while external powers mistake submission for elimination. Arsaces II, who leads the dynasty through this dangerous interval, understands that time itself is an ally if the foundations are sound. At Nisa, the dynastic heartland near what is now southern Turkmenistan, construction continues. The site that will become Old Nisa, Mithridatkert, the fortress of Mithridates, takes shape in fired brick and compacted earth. Its treasury and ritual spaces accumulate the material culture of a court finding its voice. Among the most extraordinary objects preserved from this period are the rhytons, drinking vessels carved from elephant ivory, their lower ends shaped into animal protomes, griffins, centaurs, figures drawn from both Greek and Iranian mythological traditions. These objects are not merely luxury goods. They are statements of cultural synthesis, physical evidence of a court that drinks from both wells simultaneously. The stucco work emerging from Nisa's walls reflects the same duality. Greek architectural vocabulary, pilasters, decorative friezes, appears alongside Iranian spatial sensibilities. The buildings are not purely Hellenistic, nor purely Iranian. They occupy a deliberate middle ground, the aesthetic expression of a dynasty that rules a mixed population and chooses to mirror that complexity in its monuments. Coinage tells the same story, but faster. The earliest Arsacid coins bear strong Seleucid influence. The portrait style, the reverse imagery, the Greek script. But across the decades following Antiochus III's campaign, the iconography shifts. The archer motif strengthens. The royal portrait becomes more distinctly Iranian in character. Greek legends persist because Greek remains the administrative and commercial language of the Eastern Mediterranean world. But the identity behind those letters is changing. By the time Priapedius and then Phraates I succeed to Arsacid leadership, in the decades following Arsaces II, the dynasty has quietly expanded its reach northward and eastward, absorbing neighboring territories without triggering the kind of alarm that might draw Seleucid attention back. The Seleucid Empire, meanwhile, is fracturing under its own pressures, Roman power rising in the west, the defeat of Antiochus III at Magnesia in 190 BCE stripping him of resources and prestige, the subsequent weakening of his successors. The window is opening. Parthia has spent 2 generations learning patience, absorbing culture, and maintaining just enough invisibility to survive. The dynasty that Arsaces I planted in steppe soil has grown roots deep enough now to withstand what is coming, not another storm to endure, but an opportunity to expand. The kingdom that found its footing in submission is about to discover what it can do when the restraints are finally removed. The restraints come off in 171 BCE. A new king ascends the Arsacid throne, Mithridates I, and the world east of the Euphrates will never look the same again. He inherits a kingdom that has survived through patience and careful maneuvering, a state that learned to bend without breaking. What he builds from that foundation is something altogether different, an empire that stretches from the Iranian plateau to the rivers of Mesopotamia, commanding cities older than memory itself. Mithridates I is not a cautious ruler. He reads the landscape of power with precision. The Seleucid Empire is bleeding from multiple wounds simultaneously. Its western territories contested by Rome, its eastern holdings fragmenting under pressure from Bactrian Greeks and restless Iranian populations. The moment is not merely favorable, it is unrepeatable. The first great move comes westward into Media, the ancient highland kingdom centered on Ecbatana, a city whose layered history stretches back to the Medes themselves, whose treasury once held the wealth of Achaemenid Persia. Around 148 BCE, Parthian forces sweep into Media, absorbing its fertile valleys and mountain passes, its administrative networks and urban populations. Ecbatana falls under Arsacid control, and with it comes something beyond territory, legitimacy. To hold Ecbatana is to stand in the shadow of Cyrus the Great, to inherit the symbolic weight of Iranian kingship itself. The camera lingers on the Iranian plateau at altitude, the thin, cold air, the vast distances between settlements, the ancient roads carved into mountain flanks by generations of traders and armies. This is the terrain Mithridates commands, and he commands it with a cavalry force that is beginning to evolve into something formidable. The cataphract, the heavily armored horseman mounted on an armored steed, emerges as the defining weapon of Parthian military power. Archaeological evidence from Dura Europos preserves fragments of this equipment, overlapping iron scales sewn onto leather backing, bronze chamfrons protecting horse faces, lances long enough to shatter infantry formations on impact. Against Seleucid armies already weakened by decades of attrition, this force is devastating. By 141 BCE, Mithridates reaches the Tigris. Seleucia on Tigris, one of the great cities of the Hellenistic world, opens to Arsacid rule. Its grid-planned streets, laid out by Seleucus I Nicator himself, following Macedonian urban principles, now carry Parthian soldiers past colonnaded facades and fired brick warehouses. The city's Greek population remains largely in place. Mithridates understands that conquest without accommodation is merely destruction. He presents himself not as a destroyer of Hellenistic civilization, but as its new steward. It is here, in Mesopotamia, that Mithridates I adopts the title that announces everything, King of Kings. The phrase carries enormous historical resonance. It is the title of the Achaemenid emperors, of Darius and Xerxes, of the rulers who once commanded the largest empire the ancient world had known. By claiming it, Mithridates positions the Arsacid dynasty not as steppe newcomers, but as legitimate heirs to the entire Iranian imperial tradition. His coinage reflects this transformation. Magnificent silver drachms bearing his bearded portrait, rendered with a new confidence and grandeur that earlier Arsacid coins never attempted. The Seleucid king Demetrius II attempts a counterattack in 138 BCE, pushing eastward to reclaim Mesopotamia. The campaign fails. Demetrius is captured by Parthian forces and held, treated with royal courtesy, even given a Parthian princess in marriage, but kept firmly away from his throne. The message is unmistakable. The age of Seleucid dominance over the Iranian world is finished. What Mithridates I leaves behind when he dies, also around 138 BCE, is not simply a larger kingdom. It is a transformed political reality, a multi-ethnic empire fusing Iranian, Hellenistic, and Mesopotamian traditions under a dynasty that has mastered the art of ruling through cultural synthesis rather than cultural erasure. The empire stretches from the Euphrates to the edges of Bactria. Its capital will soon rise at Ctesiphon, across the river from Seleucia. The Arsacid dynasty has found its true scale at last. The Euphrates moves slowly here, near the frontier where the Seleucid world once ended and the Parthian world now begins. The river carries silt southward in long, unhurried coils. It is 92 BCE, and on its western bank stands a Roman officer named Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Not yet the dictator history will remember, but already a man who understands power. On the eastern bank, a Parthian ambassador named Orobazus waits. The meeting is brief, formal, and historic. Two empires have acknowledged each other's existence. The consequences will take 4 decades to fully arrive. The Parthian Empire that faces Rome across the Euphrates is no longer the fragile steppe kingdom of Arsaces I. Under Mithridates II, who rules from roughly 124 to 88 BCE and earns the title the Great, Parthia has consolidated its vast inheritance. Mithridates II pushes Parthian borders westward into Mesopotamia and northward toward Armenia, forcing the Armenian king Tigranes to surrender territory and hostages. The empire now controls the Silk Road's central arteries. Its treasury fills with caravan tolls. Its army has evolved into something Rome has never encountered before. That army is built around 2 revolutionary elements. The first is the cataphract, a heavily armored cavalryman mounted on an equally armored horse, both rider and animal encased in overlapping bronze scales or chainmail, the rider carrying a long lance called a kontos, capable of driving through Roman shields. The second is the mounted archer, riding without armor, but with devastating mobility, capable of loosing arrows at full gallop, including the famous rearward shot, the Parthian shot, fired while appearing to retreat, drawing pursuers into lethal range before they realize the danger has never diminished. Roman legions are built for different terrain and different enemies. The manipular formation, the heavy pilum javelin, the short gladius sword. These tools excel in close-quarters infantry combat on European ground. Against Parthian cavalry on the open Mesopotamian plain, they find no purchase. The legions need to close distance. The Parthians refuse to let them. By 53 BCE, Rome's richest man, Marcus Licinius Crassus, arrives in Syria, hungry for military glory to match his political partners, Caesar and Pompey. He commands roughly 35,000 men, 7 legions, cavalry, and auxiliaries. He crosses the Euphrates near Zeugma and marches southeast into the flat, treeless plains near the city of Karhay, modern Harran in southeastern Turkey. The landscape offers no cover, no elevation, no advantage for infantry. It is, in every geographic sense, Parthian ground. The Parthian commander opposing him is Surena, a nobleman of the Suren family, one of Parthia's great feudal houses, still in his 20s, but already a general of extraordinary tactical intelligence. Surena fields perhaps 10,000 men, mostly cavalry. He solves the problem of arrow supply by organizing a camel train carrying replacement ammunition. ensuring his horse archers never exhaust their quivers. The battle unfolds with terrible clarity. Roman infantry form the testudo, the tortoise formation, shields locked overhead. But the Parthian arrows punch through gaps, find ankles and faces, wear down cohesion over hours of relentless pressure. When Roman cavalry attempts to pursue the horse archers, the archers simply ride away, loosing backward, drawing the cavalry further from the infantry until Parthian cataphracts wheel and destroy them. Crassus's son Publius dies leading one such charge. The Roman army, leaderless and exhausted, collapses. Crassus himself is killed during failed negotiations. Roughly 20,000 Romans die. Another 10,000 are captured and marched east into Parthian territory. 3 Roman eagle standards, the sacred symbols of legionary identity, are taken. Their loss haunts Rome for decades. Augustus will eventually negotiate their return in 20 BCE, treating the diplomatic recovery as a military triumph. The psychological wound of Carrhae never fully heals. What Serena demonstrates at Carrhae is not simply tactical brilliance. It is the proof that Parthian military doctrine, mobile, combined arms, terrain-aware, represents a genuinely different and formidable way of making war. Rome will invade Parthia again. It will sack Ctesiphon, but it will never conquer the Parthian heartland. The empire that began on the windswept steppe east of the Caspian has drawn a line in the Mesopotamian sand, and Rome, for all its power, cannot cross it permanently. The dust of Carrhae settles, and in its aftermath, a different kind of power comes into focus. Not the power of cavalry charges and composite bows, but the quieter, more durable power of courts, councils, and carefully arranged ceremony. Ctesiphon rises on the eastern bank of the Tigris River, in the flat, alluvial heart of Mesopotamia. It is not yet the vast metropolis it will become under later dynasties, but already it carries the weight of imperial intention. Fired brick walls enclose palace precincts where stucco reliefs catch the afternoon light. The Iwan, a vaulted audience hall open at one end, frames the king's presence with architectural theater. Visitors entering the royal court pass through layers of space deliberately designed to communicate distance between the ruler and the world beyond. The king who sits at the center of this world in the decades following Carrhae is Orodes II. It is his general Surena who destroyed Crassus, though Orodes, fearing Surena's growing reputation, had him executed shortly after the victory. Power in the Arsacid court is never simple. It flows through channels that are feudal, familial, and deeply conditional. The Arsacid system of rule rests on a compact between the king and a constellation of great noble houses. These families, some of them bearing names that echo across centuries of Iranian history, like the Suren and Karen clans, provide military commanders, regional governors, and court officials. In return, they expect consultation, reward, and respect for their inherited privileges. The Megistanes, a council of senior nobles and Zoroastrian priests, holds formal authority to confirm, and in crisis to remove, the king himself. This is not democracy, but it is a structured check on royal absolutism that Rome, with its senatorial traditions, might have recognized in outline, if not in detail. Succession is the system's most dangerous fault line. When Orodes II eventually designates his son, Phraates IV, as heir, the transition is violent. Phraates eliminates his father and then methodically removes rival brothers to secure his position. The pattern repeats across Arsacid history, not as moral failure, but as structural consequence. A feudal empire with multiple powerful claimants and no fixed succession law generates fratricidal competition almost inevitably. Yet, Phraates IV, once consolidated, proves a ruler of considerable sophistication. His reign, stretching from approximately 37 BCE into the early 1st century BCE, coincides with Rome's own turbulent transformation from republic to empire. Mark Antony launches two major campaigns against Parthia in 36 and 33 BCE, both ending in costly Roman retreats across Armenian highlands. Parthia absorbs the pressure and holds its territory. The diplomatic masterstroke comes in 20 BCE. Augustus, newly supreme in Rome, seeks to recover the eagle standards lost at Carrhae without the cost of another failed military campaign. Phraates IV, reading the moment with precision, returns the standards voluntarily, framing the gesture as magnanimous diplomacy rather than concession. Augustus presents it to Rome as a triumph. Phraates presents it to his court as proof of Parthian dominance over Roman anxiety. Both rulers extract value from the same transaction. The Arsacid court that orchestrates these maneuvers is visually distinctive. Royal dress combines Iranian and Hellenistic traditions. Trousers of embroidered fabric, decorated tunics, elaborate headdresses. Silver rhytons shaped as animal protomes appear at royal banquets, their craftsmanship blending Greek form with Iranian iconography. Parthian art favors frontal portraiture, figures rendered flat and hieratic, gazing directly outward with an authority that feels deliberate rather than naive. This is an empire that knows what it is. It has survived Seleucid pressure, absorbed Hellenistic culture without being consumed by it, and held Rome at a distance through military force and diplomatic intelligence. The court at Ctesiphon, with its layered ceremony and feudal complexity, is the engine that sustains it all. Fragile in its internal tensions, formidable in its external projection. The camel moves at the pace of empire. Across the Iranian plateau, where the land bakes to pale ochre under a relentless sun, long caravans thread through mountain passes and desert margins, carrying the weight of two worlds on their backs. By the 1st century CE, the Parthian Empire has become something more than a military power or a royal court. It has become the indispensable artery of the ancient world circulatory system, the living bridge between Rome in the west and the Han dynasty of China in the east. The Silk Road is not a single road. It is a network of routes, shifting with season and security, converging on Parthian-controlled cities that function as nodes of exchange, taxation, and transformation. Silk moves westward, bolts of luminous fabric woven in Chinese workshops, so prized in Rome that senators debated legislation against its extravagance. Glassware travels eastward, Roman and Syrian blown glass catching light in markets thousands of kilometers from its origin. Spices, lapis lazuli from the mountains of Bactria, ivory, cotton textiles, and dried fruits all pass through Parthian hands. And with every passing caravan, the Arsacid treasury collects its share. The taxation system is methodical. Caravans entering Parthian territory pay duties at designated stations. Structured tolls that generate revenues sustaining the empire's administrative apparatus. Ancient sources suggest these commercial taxes formed a substantial pillar of Parthian state income, supplementing the tribute extracted from vassal kingdoms. The empire's geography makes this possible. Controlling the plateau between Mesopotamia and Central Asia means controlling the only viable overland corridor between East and West. Dura Europos stands as the most vivid surviving portrait of this cosmopolitan world. Positioned on a limestone bluff above the Euphrates in what is now eastern Syria, the city serves as a frontier garrison and commercial hub simultaneously. Its streets contain temples to Greek, Mesopotamian, Iranian, and later Jewish and early Christian communities, all coexisting within the same mud-brick urban fabric. Inscriptions on its walls appear in Greek, Aramaic, and Parthian, sometimes within the same building. Merchants, soldiers, priests, and artisans from across the known world move through its colonnaded streets. The Han Dynasty records confirm what archaeology suggests. Chinese imperial annals describe ambassadors from a great Western empire they call Angxi, Parthia, arriving at the Han court, bearing gifts of ostrich eggs and trained acrobats, opening diplomatic channels that parallel the commercial ones. Around 97 CE, a Han envoy named Gan Ying travels westward toward Rome, reaching the Persian Gulf before Parthian intermediaries discourage further progress. A detail that reveals how deliberately the Arsacids managed their middleman position, protecting the commercial advantage that geography had granted them. In the cities of the plateau, Hekatompelos, Ecbatana, Seleucia on Tigris, warehouses line the approaches to market districts. Merchants negotiate in multiple languages. Parthian silver drachms, stamped with the bearded profile of the reigning Arsacid king, circulate as the standard currency of exchange across this vast commercial zone. The coins themselves tell the story of cultural fusion, Greek legends gradually giving way to Parthian script, Hellenistic iconography blending with Iranian royal symbolism. This is an empire that profits from connection rather than conquest alone. Its power rests not only on cataphract cavalry and feudal loyalty, but on the simple, relentless fact that the world's most valuable goods must pass through its territory to reach their destinations. The Arsacids understand this. They maintain the roads, garrison the passes, and collect the tolls, sustaining a civilization whose wealth flows not from the earth beneath it, but from the endless movement across it. Wealth moves through Parthia like blood through a living body. But beneath the commerce, beneath the cataphract charges and the diplomatic letters exchanged with Rome and Han China, something older and quieter shapes the civilization from within. It lives in the sacred flame burning at the center of a fire temple on the Iranian plateau. It lives in the stucco face staring outward from a temple wall at Hatra, eyes wide, frontal, unblinking, as if looking directly into eternity. The Parthians inherit a world of extraordinary religious complexity. Across their vast territory, Zoroastrian traditions coexist with Mesopotamian polytheism, Greek mystery cults, and local Iranian tribal beliefs. The Arsacid kings themselves practice a form of Zoroastrianism, venerating Ahura Mazda and maintaining the sacred fire as a symbol of divine kingship. Fire temples, simple square structures with a central chamber housing the eternal flame, appear across the Iranian plateau from Nisa to Ecbatana. The flame is not merely symbolic, it is the living presence of the divine, tended by priests, never permitted to extinguish. Yet the Parthians impose no religious uniformity on their subjects. In Mesopotamia, ancient temples to Marduk and Nabu continue functioning. In the frontier city of Dura Europos on the Euphrates, a synagogue, a Christian house church, a temple to Zeus, and a Mithraeum stand within the same city walls. This tolerance is not indifference. It is a deliberate administrative philosophy. A diverse empire requires diverse accommodations. Nowhere does this synthesis become more architecturally visible than at Hatra. Rising from the desert of northern Mesopotamia, Hatra functions as a semi-independent city-state under Parthian suzerainty during the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. Its great circular walls enclose a sacred precinct of extraordinary ambition. At the center stands a complex of temples dedicated to Shamash, the sun god, alongside shrines to Arabian, Mesopotamian, and Iranian deities simultaneously. The architecture fuses Hellenistic colonnades with something distinctly new, the monumental Iwan, a massive barrel-vaulted hall open at one end, framing the sacred interior with a soaring arch of fired brick and dressed stone. The Iwan is perhaps Parthia's most consequential architectural gift to the future. Its logic is elegant, a vast covered space requiring no internal columns, its thrust distributed through the curve of the vault itself. At Hatra, these arches rise to heights that dwarf the human figure standing beneath them. The effect is deliberate. The worshipper enters a space engineered to produce awe. This architectural form will pass directly into Sassanid palace design, then into the mosque architecture of the Islamic world, where the Iwan becomes a defining element of sacred space across 14 centuries. The sculptural tradition developing alongside this architecture carries its own revolutionary logic. Parthian artists abandon the three-quarter perspective of Hellenistic convention and turn their figures to face directly outward. In the stucco friezes recovered from Ashur and the carved reliefs of Hatra, figures stand rigid, frontal, their enormous eyes inlaid with dark stone or painted to catch the light. Hands are raised in gestures of offering or blessing. Garments fall in flat, decorative folds rather than naturalistic drapes. The effect is hieratic. These are not portraits of individuals, but presences, divine or royal figures made permanent in stone and plaster. Bronze statues from Parthian period sites carry this same intensity. The famous Shami bronze, recovered from southwestern Iran, depicts a Parthian nobleman in characteristic dress, fitted trousers, a decorated tunic belted at the waist, and an expression of calm authority rendered with inlaid eyes that still hold their gaze across 2 millennia. Jewelry recovered from Parthian burials, gold torques, garnet-set earrings, elaborate pectorals, confirms the material sophistication of our Sassanid aristocratic culture. This is a civilization that builds for eternity and adorns itself for the living world simultaneously. Its gods burn in temple fires across 1,000 miles of plateau and plain. Its arches rise above desert cities. Its carved faces stare outward, unblinking, from walls that outlast the empire itself. The gods still burn in Hatra's fire temples when the legions arrive. It is 113 CE, and Rome has decided that patience with Parthia has run its course. Emperor Trajan, the conqueror of Dacia, turns his attention eastward. The pretext is Armenia, a kingdom perpetually contested between the two empires, a buffer state whose throne Parthia has filled with its own candidate. For Trajan, this is provocation enough. His legions, numbering perhaps 80,000 men, cross the Euphrates and begin the most ambitious Roman Eastern campaign since Mark Antony's failed invasion a century and a half earlier. The campaign moves with Roman efficiency. Armenia falls in 114 CE. Mesopotamia follows. By 116 CE, Trajan's forces reach Ctesiphon itself, the great Arsacid capital beside the Tigris. The city falls. The Parthian king Osroes I flees. Trajan sits briefly in the throne room of the Arsacid kings and declares a new Roman province, Mesopotamia, as though the declaration alone could hold it. He reaches the Persian Gulf. He watches the sea and reportedly laments that he is too old to follow Alexander's path to India. It is the furthest east any Roman emperor will ever stand. But conquest and control are different things entirely. Behind Trajan's advancing columns, Mesopotamia rises in revolt. Jewish communities rebel simultaneously across the eastern provinces. Parthian forces, never truly destroyed, reassemble and strike Roman garrisons. The new province dissolves almost as quickly as it was proclaimed. Trajan withdraws, falls ill, and dies in 117 CE before reaching Rome. His successor Hadrian abandons all eastern conquests immediately, restoring the Euphrates as the boundary. The Arsacids recover Ctesiphon. The empire breathes again, but the structural damage runs deeper than burned buildings. Succession disputes have plagued the Arsacid dynasty throughout the 2nd century CE, with rival claimants, often backed by Rome or by powerful noble families, fracturing royal authority repeatedly. The Megistanes Council, that assembly of great nobles with the power to confirm or reject kings, becomes an arena of factional violence rather than orderly governance. Between 105 and 165 CE, at least 4 separate civil wars erupt within the Arsacid family itself. Rome exploits every fracture. In 165 CE, the co-emperors Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus launch another eastern campaign. Roman forces under Avidius Cassius sack Ctesiphon again and burn the royal palace at Seleucia on Tigris. The destruction is immense. Worse, the returning legions carry plague westward, the Antonine Plague, which devastates the Roman Empire for decades. Even victory poisons both sides. The Arsacids rebuild once more. Ctesiphon's fired brick walls rise again beside the Tigris. The Iwan arches are restored. Trade resumes along the Silk Road corridors. The empire's capacity for recovery remains remarkable, sustained by the deep revenues of caravan taxation and the loyalty of regional noble houses when central authority holds firm. Then Septimius Severus arrives. In 197 CE, the African-born emperor who seized Rome through civil war turns east to burnish his military reputation. His legions cross the Euphrates, march through Mesopotamia, and sack Ctesiphon for the 3rd time in living memory. The treasury is plundered. Tens of thousands of Parthian civilians are reportedly enslaved. The palace quarter burns again against the Mesopotamian sky. Severus cannot hold the territory either. The pattern repeats. Roman legions advance. Parthian resistance hardens. Rome withdraws. By 217 CE, Emperor Caracalla launches yet another campaign, only to be assassinated by his own troops near Carrhae, the same ground where Crassus fell 270 years earlier. His successor Macrinus negotiates peace, paying Parthia an indemnity of 50 million denarii. The land between the Euphrates and Tigris bears the accumulated scars of a century of warfare. Burned villages, disrupted irrigation systems, displaced populations. The Arsacid dynasty still rules, but its foundations have been hollowed from within and hammered from without. What neither Rome nor Parthia fully perceives is that a third force is gathering in the south, in the ancient Persian heartland of Persis, that will end this long rivalry permanently. In the ancient Persian heartland of Persis, far south of the scarred Mesopotamian plain, something stirs. The region has always carried memory. It is the land of Cyrus, of Dorius, of Persepolis's columned halls. For centuries it submitted to Arsacid overlordship, paying tribute, supplying soldiers, enduring the feudal hierarchy that Parthia imposed across its vast territories. But around 208 CE, a man named Ardashir, son of Papak, begins consolidating power among the local Persian dynasts, with a determination that feels less like ambition and more like historical inevitability. Ardashir is a priest-king from the city of Istakhar, near the ruins of Persepolis itself. He claims descent from the ancient Achaemenid line, a claim whose historical accuracy remains debated, but whose political power is undeniable. By 220 CE, he has subdued neighboring Persian lords, absorbed their armies, and begun moving north. Artabanus IV, the last Arsacid king of kings, cannot ignore what is happening in his southern provinces. He mobilizes. The two forces meet 3 times before the decisive encounter. Each engagement tests the resolve of both sides. Then, in 224 CE, at a place called Hormozgan, its exact location still disputed by scholars, somewhere in the southwestern Iranian plateau, the armies clash in a battle that ends an empire. Artabanus IV is killed in the fighting. The Arsacid dynasty, which Arsaces I founded nearly 5 centuries earlier on the windswept steppe east of the Caspian, ceases to rule. At Naksh-e-Rostam, cut into the cliff face beside the tombs of Achaemenid kings, Ardashir commemorates his victory in stone. The rock relief shows him receiving the ring of kingship from Ahura Mazda, the supreme Zoroastrian deity. Beneath the hooves of Ardashir's horse lies the trampled body of Artabanus IV. The imagery is deliberate, layered, ancient in its symbolism. A new dynasty, the Sassanids, has arrived, and it announces itself in the language of Persian sacred kingship. Yet the Parthian world does not simply vanish. Sassanid kings inherit Ctesiphon, expanding and refining its great Iwan arch into the magnificent Tak Khazra, whose barrel vault still stands today as one of antiquity's most astonishing surviving structures. The cataphract cavalry tradition, refined across centuries of Arsacid warfare, passes directly into Sassanid military doctrine and from there into Byzantine and early Islamic armies. The Silk Road infrastructure, the caravanserais, the tax trade routes, the merchant networks threading from China to the Mediterranean, continues functioning under new management. In Armenia, the Arsacid line survives. A branch of the dynasty rules there as kings, maintaining Parthian cultural traditions, the Parthian language in ceremonial use, and Arsacid dynastic identity. Armenian Arsacid kings reign until 428 CE, 2 full centuries after Hormozgan. The dynasty's blood, if not its empire, endures. The Iwan Arch, that great vaulted portal opening onto courtyards, travels forward through time with remarkable persistence. It appears in Sassanid palaces, in early Islamic mosques, in the madrasas of medieval Persia and Central Asia, in Mughal garden architecture. Every time a traveler passes beneath a monumental vaulted arch in the Islamic world, they pass through a form the Parthians helped define. The Parthians left no great written histories of their own. Rome recorded their defeats and their threats. Sassanid propaganda buried their memory beneath claims of Persian restoration. Yet the coins survive, silver drachms bearing bearded Arsacid profiles, minted across 5 centuries, and the rock reliefs, and the fired brick of Ctesiphon's foundations, and the stucco friezes of Hatra still holding their carved faces toward a sky that has watched empires rise and dissolve for millennia. They were the forgotten empire. the civilization that held Rome at bay, sustained the ancient world's greatest trade network, and built the architectural grammar of a civilization that would outlast them by 1,000 years. History has been slow to remember them, but the evidence endures, patient as stone, waiting to be read. If this journey through the Parthian world has moved or intrigued you, consider subscribing to follow future explorations of the ancient world's forgotten powers. There are more lost empires waiting to be recovered, and their stories are worth every moment.